Welcome to Politics Done Right on KPFT. I am your host, Egberto Williams. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Give me a call at 713-526-5738. That is 713-526-KPFT. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Williams. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey Shannon, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well, Egberto. How are you?
Well, so far, so good. As you know, this is our Thanksgiving show or Thanksgiving radio show. We're all getting all these things ready. Everybody's getting ready to go have dinner. Or you know what? Actually, by now, many would have had their dinner, don't you think?
I think they'd be well into it and probably well into football as well.
You know, I tell you, first of all, before we go any further, how was your week?
It's been pretty good week. Pretty good. I mean, that weather just, it kicked it off where it's starting to feel a little bit more like, dare I say, Christmas?
Actually, yes. But you know what's interesting? Earlier on, we were going to do this recording a few days ago, and it seems like the weather kind of played a number on you for a while.
I know. Yeah, I got a little bit under the weather, but hopefully I'm going to kick it back.
Well, actually, I think you're doing fine right now. But, we actually have an interesting show today because normally we go ahead and we get started and we do our thing and we say we have the blog of the week. I'm going to do something a little bit different today. So here we go. I have my thing here, and assuming that the internet behaves itself, I'm going to start with the little reading here. And it goes like this. Today, we'll discuss 3 distinct topics: war, economics, and millionaires. I mean, those sound disjointed. It may sound at times that these are disjointed topics, but the reality is they are not. After the blog of the week, which it's really going to be like several blogs, we will play 3 interviews that I did over the last 2 weeks. The first one will be an interview with Chris Hedges, where he discusses the recent bombings in Paris and the reaction of the West. The second will be with economist Richard Wolff, who answers a critical question about taxation and capitalism. And the third interview will be with Maurice Pearl. Who is Maurice Pearl? He is the former managing director of BlackRock, Inc. and chairman of the board of Patriotic, Millionaires.
Wow, that sounds like quite a lineup of people.
And that's the longest interview that we're going to do. That one is about, I think, 15 minutes long or so.
15 minutes of gold.
Yeah, this guy was actually pretty impressive because he made millions on the stock market. Now, this interview, before I go any further with this, I have to tell you something about this interview because, well, better than that, I think I better move forward. And before we talk about the Patriotic Millionaire, I'll talk a little bit about some things that were concerning with you, and then we'll move on. So let's go forward and let me bring a little intro here and say, before I get to the program, I want to remind our listeners of something that's very important. KPFT is a bastion of what? Intelligent voices. Intelligent voices and program. As a political activist, I have my favorites. Which ones I like?
I do know.
The Monitor with
Mike Babowie.
On Mondays at?
I believe it's 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock. You remember.
Of course. I listen every week.
And on Think Wing Radio with?
Our dear Mike
Honig. And that plays on?
Isn't it 9 p.m.?
On Mondays.
Mondays at 9 p.m.
You got it, young lady. You got it. I also love, and you actually engineer for him as well, Partisan Gridlock.
Yep, with Jeff Berg.
And what time is that?
It's 3 p.m., just like yours, but that's on Fridays.
That's on Friday. I'm 3 p.m. on Thursdays. But here's the interesting thing. I'm adding a new show to my repertoire, and this one now has nothing to do with politics. This one is all about música.
Oh, la music.
La music, Latin jazz,
Ooh.
or Jazz Latino is the name of the show with Juan. You know, and I mean, I'm going to have fun, actually. You know, Juan always comes and he says, you know, you always talk about those talk show guys, but what about my show? And it's like, Juan, you are absolutely correct. So we have to make sure and get one in there. So remember, folks, that is right after Mike Honig's shows, which mean it's 10 p.m. on Mondays at
KPFT Houston 90.1
10 p.m.
FM.
on Mondays. So folks, do remember that. But hey, look, check out our full schedule at kpft.org, where you can find programming from music to politics to medicine to the eclectic. KPFT is listener-supported public community radio, so please do remember that if you like what you hear, visit kpft.org and ensure we remain a strong, viable community radio station that provides news, programming, and information not influenced by
the corporate media.
And that, look, folks, that is, you know, Shannon, that is very important. We have to stay independent. There's an interesting thing happened and recently. Actually, it happened today. Well, it happened last night. Well, for us, it's today. I was up till, I think, 1 or so in the morning. And just before I go to bed, I like to look at the news feed. And I looked at the news feed, and what did I see? There was a shooting in Minneapolis where 3 guys, I think they were supremacists, went and shot up Black Lives Matters.
I heard about that.
Right. But what was interesting about that is, you know, we just had the thing in Paris where we had all those shootings, and it was big news that somebody came up using a weapon and shoot this place up. I really expected in the morning when I woke up, which was about 3-4 hours later, that I was going to see that was one of the things plastered, because, to put it bluntly, anybody going into a crowd, what you really have is some sort that's a terrorist act if you're shooting somebody for that reason, and it never played that way. We continued in Paris. Paris occurred 10 days ago. I understand that it was 132 people. That is horrendous. But we have domestic terrorism at home, and a dead person knows only that person is dead. So it's disconcerting the way we promote news in the United States in such a manner that it's textured based on what they want you to do.
Oh, yes.
And after Chris Hedges, we're going to talk a little bit about what they're trying to do and why they're playing the news up the way they are right now, because they're trying to do something special.
And once I saw the underbelly, once I saw actually the belly of the beast, I was so disgusted.
Right.
You know, and so it's beautiful that this place exists, that we can actually dissect it and explain what they're trying to do, how they're trying to manipulate you.
Right. And it's terrible, but you know, the problem a lot of times is that a lot of times one does not know when they're actually being manipulated.
I know.
And that is what we are here for.
It happens too easily. Oh, yes.
That is what we are here for.
And
we
I'm proud
are
to be
here.
here.
Exactly. And, you know, yes, we are a community radio station. And if you see right now, we're in a studio. Which one is this? Studio number 2?
This is HD3.
We're in the HD3 studio taping this as we speak right now.
My little humble room.
Humble room. We don't have all the great digital high-tech equipment that, let's say, NPR has, but we only have whom? You.
Oh, yes.
You are the one that we have. But anyway, let me first let you guys know that, you know, KPFT 90.1 FM in Houston, we want to hear your voice. So we want to hear your thoughts as well. Normally, I would say let's talk, but since it's not going to be a call in today, what I'll tell you is follow it on Twitter. And if you have questions or you want to add to the program, go to Egberto Willies on Twitter. And I will actually, during this program, when it's being aired, I will be looking at those tweets. And I will be talking to you over Twitter.
Your family is going to be like, where's Thanksgiving? Where's it going?
Well, they'll see me with the phone, and I will be entertaining conversations, and I'll be entertaining fingersations.
All right.
You know, we'll do them both. So without further ado, let's go to the good old Chris Hedges.
All right, let's do it.
All right. I'm here talking with Chris Hedges. Chris, tell me a little bit about what you think is going to be the result of what has just occurred in France.
Well, we know what the result will be, which is they'll use massive amounts of industrial force as a kind of retaliation, which is, of course, the mechanism that created the terrorism in the first place. They will, as they already are, demonize Muslims. There's never any acknowledgement of the horrific amounts of violence that we visit on these communities that have created and enraged these jihadists. We're already seeing on the mainstream media them called barbarians and terrorists, and that's not helpful. I mean, if we don't understand what drives people to carry out these acts, we can't respond rationally. And I see every indication that we will, use indiscriminate violence, which only fuels, the horrific attacks that we just saw.
Well, earlier today, Christian Amanpour interviewed a politician out in France, and he said that Obama must stop leading from behind now and go to the forefront. What you think that's going to happen?
Well, that is referring to the fact that they want to put boots on the ground. They want to put troops on the ground. Because, of course, the Obama administration has already been carrying out heavy aerial assaults. So what else can they do? Well, they can deploy U.S. troops, which hasn't worked out particularly well in Afghanistan, and didn't work out particularly well in Iraq. As somebody who spent 7 years in the Middle East, I was the Middle East bureau chief for the New York Times. I find the whole thing just tragic and horrifying and frightening.
Now, what can we do as activists to try to mitigate what's happening?
Well, not support politicians who engage in this kind of rhetoric and believe that force is somehow going to solve the problem in the Middle East. We have to hold fast to the positions that we stand and not compromise by even Bernie Sanders engages in this kind of blood-curdling rhetoric. And because if we don't stand up or stand up for the Palestinians in Gaza, no one is.
Thank you very much, Chris Hedges.
Yeah.
Now, that was Chris Hedges. Now, Shannon, I interviewed Chris Hedges at the Houston Peace and Justice Center. He was given the Peace Award then for all the work that he does. As you know, Chris Hedges is an author. He's an activist. He actually teaches a whole class as well in the prison. So he's not only an intellect who went to an Ivy League school, but he practices what he preaches as far as being an activist that's out there making a difference. Now, when today I wrote a blog, and the reason I said it was maybe multiple blogs of the week is because this blog was not only inspired from some of the things that he said, but some of the realities you and I have spoken about when we've had different programs here, and it has a whole lot to do with us going back to war. And Chris alluded to that in a lot of ways after what occurred in France. So, without further ado, I want to read what I wrote this morning. This is rather important because earlier before we played Hedges, remember I mentioned what occurred in Minneapolis with Black Lives Matter and how it was actually reported. Now, you actually see today, Hollande was at the White House, the president of France, and everything that they spoke about, specifically the reporters spoke about, had more to do about what are we going to do, how are we going to further engage in Iraq and Syria. Why would we want to do that? So I kind of got upset and I wrote this. I titled it, "This is Why We Must Not Be Coerced into War in Iraq and Syria." And I subtitled, "We Must Not Go to War in Iraq and Syria." And here it goes. And I think it's important. The pressure continues to mount on President Obama to escalate his war efforts in Iraq and Syria. Even previous members of his administration are appearing on news programs criticizing his lead from behind policy. The media continue to parade them on their screens in order to tilt public opinion. Sadly, in recent polls, if recent polls are to be believed, the media have been successful in lowering the president's poll numbers on his handling of terrorism. The stooges of the defense industrial complex are partly successful. Every American must be concerned as to whether these polls will nudge the president into more than a nominal escalation toward yet another war. Colonel Jack Jacobs points out that in the immediate vicinity of Daesh, and by the way, Daesh is the ISIS, ISIL, all these different names we give them, there are very large military powers that have a huge stake in the stabilization of the area. Turkey has the 9th largest air force in the world. Iran has a 500,000 man army. Egypt has the 8th largest air force in the world. Saudi Arabia's army is larger than the French army. These powers are doing what? Very, very little. Very little. Why should the American people risk any more lives? Why should the American people invest their hard-earned dollars in the form of a tax transfer to weapons manufacturers, the defense industrial complex, to solve a problem that is not existential? Look, we should invest in our own security infrastructure and our deteriorating infrastructure at large. Think about all those bridges. Think about all the potholes right here in Houston at the local level. Think about on the national level, all the airports, all the power plants. We are a deteriorating country infrastructure. If you look at our infrastructure, why are we doing what we're doing?
We're good at war.
We're good at war. We're building the infrastructure of a few companies who build the war machines. Now, continuing, killing Daesh militants in Iraq and Syria does nothing to prevent the tentacles already in America and throughout the West from striking. I mean, those guys in France, they weren't in Syria or Iraq. They were right there in Paris. Mm-hmm. What makes one believe they're not here in America? They're not there in Mexico, Canada, and all these other places? They are there. That's not how it works. That's how we're being fooled. This new terrorism is decentralized. It's not located in one place. Yes, those guys want that territory, but that's all it is. It's decentralized. Investing trillions to take away territory others are not willing to fight for is not a task for Americans. We are fortunate. We are fortunate that we have large oceans on our east and west and friendly countries on our north and south. We should invest in protecting our coastlines and land borders. I mean, think about it. It's bound to be much less disruptive and less expensive than bombing and killing overseas, which simply promotes even more blowback. Sadly, that's the truth. Americans must stop allowing those who would use terrorism as a pretext for war in order to generate profits for a few to control our psyche. We must think pragmatically. How would a war in Iraq and Syria stop any attack on the U.S.? ISIS or any terrorist group can act without the need for territory. In America, given our gun culture, they can simply go to a gun show, buy big guns, and kill Americans. How do we know that? They do it once a month.
We do it once a month.
We do it once a month. We kill each other with these great, massive weapons once a month.
And why do we buy them? To protect ourselves, supposedly.
Yes. Right. So think about it. While we are so concerned about Daesh and them launching a Paris-like attack, by the time the next attack comes around, we would have killed way more people than been killed by Daesh in France. So let's stop being played, folks. Let us stop being played. We must not go to war again. Call your congressperson. Call our president. Engage your friends. Help them see the truth. Let's invest in our children, our workers, our country for a charge. Shannon, before I go to Richard Wolff, I'm going to bring this up to you. You're a young woman. You just got out of college. And in as much as you had a whole lot of scholarships, etc., you still had to go into some debt.
Oh, yes. Yes, I did. And I'm still paying off those loans, too.
Where is your country for you? Where is your country for you?
I would really like to have some more support, that's for sure.
And interestingly, my generation, the generation and I'm not that old now, okay? But I mean, the generation before my generation, the ones who fought Vietnam. My generation didn't fight Vietnam, but the ones who fought Vietnam.
My father's generation.
Right. You think about these different groups. The country asked them to protect them, asked them for some of these wars we may have disagreed with, but the country thought we had to do something for the World War II people. We had this thing called the GI Bill and all these programs that said, you saved us, we are going to invest in you. You went to college for free, and there were other programs, Pell Grants and so forth, that allowed my generation, the people of my age, to go to school at minimal cost. At the time that I went to college, $4 an hour. Because of these wars, because of all these things that we've done thus far, we've asked you, your generation, Shannon's generation, you are going to pay for all of our excesses. We have to stop that. You have to engage.
True. And a lot of the people that did, appeal to that call for duty, that went to Iraq and Afghanistan, so many of them, they did get those perks and those benefits. But unfortunately, many of them are coming back with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Exactly.
And I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Absolutely. Well, given that I kind of turned a bit, I said that we were going to talk about three things.
Yes.
I went a bit, we did a little bit of the war thing. Where I want to go now is I want to take us into a bit of economics, because the millionaires will tie it up at the end. So let's go ahead and listen to Richard Wolff. Richard Wolff is a wonderful economist, a real middle-class centric type economist, an economist who actually believes that it is time. Folks don't like to hear the word redistribute, but the reality is America has always been a redistributive society, just in the wrong direction. We have been redistributing your wealth all the way up.
If you can call it wealth.
Well, yes, actually it is. I'm glad you said that. Because one of the things that I've been working on for quite a long time is writing essays and blog posts asking people to understand and see their worth. And what I mean by that is what our society has done over time is it pounded in our heads that most of us are not worthy, and the ones that are worthy are those capitalists, brokers, and all these people who have created this false wealth. And the reason I call it false wealth is it's not wealth at all. Wealth is what you bring to society. That's wealth. That somebody decides not to quantify that wealth doesn't mean it isn't there. And I always use that example as far as putting the broker and the farmer on a deserted island and see who comes out alive. Who is worth more again?
That's the question. So without further ado, let's listen to Richard Wolff. I had a specific question I wanted to ask him to blow it out of the water, specifically what the GOP Republicans like to say about taxation and who should be taxed and how it affects the economy. So without further ado, let's go to Richard Wolff. Dr. Richard Wolff, it's a pleasure speaking to you. Dr. Wolff, I am interested in a particular piece of economics that always concerns me. I have this theory, or not a theory. I always say a dollar knows not from where it is spent. That's what I always say. Right. Now, why is it that classical economists tend to believe that if we give monies first to the government through taxes and that the government is going to have to spend it anyway, that somehow it is less efficient for the economy at large?
This is only a question of ideology. It really has nothing to do with economics. The actual reality is everything depends, when you spend a dollar, on what the person that you spend the dollar on does with the dollar. If that person turns around and uses it for a productive investment, then the society can benefit. If the person you spend the dollar on doesn't, then the society doesn't benefit. Therefore, if you give it to the government and they use it, for example, to improve schooling for children, it's a very productive event. If you pay the money instead to a private business that hoards the money in a savings account, it's not a positive event. It has really nothing to do with public or private, government or private. It's a question of what the recipient of your dollar does with that money. As that dollar moves around, is it stimulating production? Is it giving people jobs or not? The government can do that, and it often has, or the private sector can do it. But without knowing exactly which entity is going to get the dollar, you don't know what the consequences are. For someone to say giving it to the government is somehow inappropriate or ineffective makes no sense. It's pure kind of an ideological effort to badmouth the government, but in fact, it doesn't make any economic sense.
Now, why is it that we don't get other economists, including liberal economists, to state that? In fact, when I asked that question, that is the answer I expected out of you, given all the other things that I've read that you've done. Now, why is it that most, even liberal economists, buy into that false concept that a dollar to the government is somehow less efficient?
Because they've grown up in a society where that is virtually a religious commitment. In this country, for many years now, it has been believed that giving money to the government is somehow a waste of money, an ineffective thing to do, a drag on the larger society, whereas giving it to the private sector is a magical road to successful outcomes. Look, the reason for that is history. The last time we had an economic system that broke down in this country was the 1930s. We had a terrible collapse. And the country, the whole American country, blamed it on the private capitalists who brought us into that mess. And we turned as a society to the government, to Franklin Roosevelt and the Social Security system, the New Deal, to help us out. And it worked. The government got us out. That really upset the business community because they were afraid that people would draw the conclusion, wow, the private sector gets you into a depression and the government gets you out. In order to make sure that the people didn't get that idea, which would be a logical inference of what happened, they began a program which can't be called anything other than relentless propaganda. Giving money to the government is bad, giving money to the private sector is good. Since most people don't like to pay taxes anyway, this had a receptive audience. Oh good, I don't want to have to pay taxes. Until people realize that if you don't pay taxes, the roads aren't maintained, the children don't get an education in school, the hospitals can't take care of you, because in fact, money given to governments is used for the well-being of the society as a whole. Sometimes governments don't do that efficiently, but sometimes private companies don't do what's efficient either. That's really, again, nothing to do with public versus private, but has to do with who the people are and what the circumstances are when you spend money on public or private. So it's really only a question of the ideology. For 60 years now, we've been in a get rid of the New Deal frame of mind, downplaying and bad-mouthing the government as if it were necessarily bad or inefficient. It really makes no sense and has no basis in any kind of serious looking at what happens. For every example of giving money to the government that ended up not working out well, I can give you a parallel example of giving money to a private company where the same thing happened. So it's just childish to pretend that the badness is all on one side and the goodness is all on the other. It's not serious, and it's shameful if educated people talk like that.
Dr. Wolff, excellent, and thank you very much.
Thank you for your interest.
Now, we just got through listening to Richard Wolff, actually a pretty darn wonderful economist that I've listened to several times. This is a man who believes he's not really trying to tear down the system. He's trying to enhance the system, the economic system that we have. Right now, what we have, as everybody knows, is unfettered capitalism in which the vast minority of people, those in the business, not the business class, but what I like to call the titans of finance, are really controlling not only the economy, but our lives, our our most being. Think about it. Every move that we make must somehow go through these guys. In the book that I wrote a few years ago called As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, one of the things that I really wanted to put out in that book was how much control these people have over our lives. And because of the control that these people have over our lives, it's the exact reason why America is non-performing, why America cannot perform. I gave many examples of what capitalism in its current form has done to individual citizens, but really it is in the aggregate what it does to us all. I can give examples as far as, something as simple as the farmer. There was a time when the farmer would actually go ahead and plant his seeds. He gets a crop. He reserves some of the seeds from that crop for the next year's crop, etc., etc., etc. Well, of course, we have all the seed companies now. They sell seeds with different genetic codes. And in effect, when you buy these seeds, you're actually buying their patent, or rather, you're buying the use of their patent for using that seed one time. In order to move forward, you must again purchase that seed again. In other words, you can't regenerate your seed from the plantations, from what you planted. We have the patent system. There was a time, and this is sort of a personal story. I remember back in the early days of websites, etc., I was actually going to put a special type of a one-click cart together. Well, guess what? I think it was Amazon who patented that method, one click. I think so far that patent has been overthrown or deceased or whatever, but it actually stifles a product that I was going to make. You take a look at how patents affect medicine. Patents actually are used to control how much, or rather, hold on to a particular formula for 17 years. And now what the drug companies do is they add a little substance to the formula, start marketing it, and gets another 17 years to further market their software. So in effect, what we're looking at is a system that is not catered towards the average American citizen. And what Richard Wolff was talking about when he talks about how taxation and the economy works, it is just a very small subset of what ails the country in general. I mean, I always talk about it is essential. It is utter essential that we as Americans take the country back from that class, from the titans of finance, those people that make no product, those people that create no services, those people that do nothing but simply move money around. We have to get away from that. Now, interesting why I brought that little rant based on, or rather what I should say, I brought that rant that was actually initiated by my interview with Richard Wolff, this great economist that we just played before, sort of lead into the next person that we're going to bring into the fold. We are going to bring in a man. He actually, I'll introduce him formally in a little bit, but the other interview is, I've been following a company, or not a company, but an organization called the Patriotic Millionaires. And I started following that particular organization during the 2012 election. I don't remember if it's if I did anything with them beforehand, but I followed them during the 2012 election because if you remember, Mitt Romney had this moniker that he used to like, that he always used, this great moniker of the 47%. 47% who doesn't pay taxes, 47% in effect he's saying that is useless, 47% that are of no value. He got taped pretty much saying or inferring those things about the 47% of people who don't pay federal income tax. Of course, we must realize that every single living American, poor or otherwise, once they go to a store and buy something that's taxable, they're paying sales taxes. When they buy their gasoline, they're paying gasoline taxes. When they buy just about everything, they're actually paying taxes. So they're doing their part. In fact, the taxes that they pay is a larger percentage of their own economy that it is from that than the taxes are as a percentage of the economy of a more wealthy person. So no, the 47% moniker was a huge disservice to pretty much isolate a group, to pretty much put a scarlet letter on a group in order to dismiss them as useless to society.
a real bad thing to do. Well, Mitt Romney, the millionaire, did that. And then, of course, remember during the Obama administration, or rather the Obama second run again, I think it was 2012, he actually said something to the effect that you didn't make that, or you didn't do that, or something to that effect, which in effect says that, right, that rich man didn't make all that made him rich, just like that poor person wasn't all responsible, or for the vast majority of the poor aren't responsible for the state they're in. A lot of times they're just darn unlucky. Let somebody right now that's making several $100,000 a year get sick, cannot work anymore, and have some sort of a disease where they're in a hospital for a long time and they are not covered somehow under Obamacare. In the past, it was a lot worse, but we still have problems today. In the past, it was a lot worse. Today, you cannot go bankrupt in effect because, again, your maximum out-of-pocket cost is going to be $12,000. But, a big but, that's still a lot of money for a whole lot of people. So anyhow, the next person that we're going to bring in is an interesting person. I gained a whole lot of respect for the organization. And after listening to this guy, I gained a whole lot more respect for him. I think this guy is what the template of a real benevolent, patriotic millionaire is all about. You know, recently I interviewed Morris Pearl. This man is deep into finance, something that I usually scoff at, something that I usually am generally not very positive about. But we do, in fact, live in a world, in a society where finance plays a big part. And to have one of these guys, if you will, on our side, I'll take it. The fact that he's on our side means that he saw some realities. You know, I have been following and blogging about the Patriotic Millionaires for some time. They provided a great backstop to, like I said before, Mitt Romney's 47% moniker during the 2012 election. Who are they? What they stand for and how they intend to make a difference is very well stated as follows. The Patriotic Millionaires are a group of more than 200 Americans with annual incomes over $1 million and or assets of more than $5 million who believe that the country's current level of economic inequality is both dangerous and immoral. Say immoral. They recognize that while there are many causes of inequality, the current level of economic disparity is largely the result of a multi-decade effort by wealthy elites to enact legislation designed to enhance their personal wealth and their political power. This is done with little or no regard for the negative consequences such policies have on the vast majority of Americans. The Patriotic Millionaires are dedicated to reversing these policies and to ensure that the legislative capture that led to their adoption comes to an end. To realize that goal, the Patriotic Millionaires focus on a set of issues that best illustrate the difference between legislation that serves the interests of the majority of citizens and that which enriches just a few. These issues are taxes and wages and the democratic process. Members expressly support legislation that directly yields a fairer tax system that includes greater tax obligations for millionaires and major corporations who have benefited the most from the nation's resources, higher incomes, beginning with a minimum wage of at least $15 an hour, for wage earners who are the foundation of our nation's economy, and last but not least, less political influence for those whose sole credential is the ability to pay for it. The Patriotic Millionaires' strategy relies primarily on public education. They seek to use their unique position to expose the ways privileged self-interests influence the country's legislative process. They also highlight specific policies that best serve the interests of the majority and that can promptly reverse growing levels of inequality. Look, in the interview, Morris Pearl points out the epiphany he had while in Athens, Greece, looking out the window at a demonstration. He realized he was in a room helping 20 or so banker types, and not the thousands who were simply trying to survive. At that point, he realized he needed to work at helping not the few, but the many. Early in the interview, Mr. Pearl was well aware that his hard work was not solely responsible for his success. He realized he was born into the right family at the right time, under the right conditions. He further understands that as such, structural changes are needed to mitigate chance. He recognizes that wealth is not directly proportional to intelligence. Income inequality is destroying the country. The people who want to know the numbers know them. Most people know there is a problem, but believe they can do nothing about it. They fail to recognize, irrespective of wealth, that every single person has one vote. That one vote puts the poor person and the wealthy person on the same political playing field if exercised. Unfortunately, too many do not exercise that right. In not exercising that right, they've ceded policies to those who engage with politicians, rich people. Over several decades, there has been an industry designed to infiltrate institutions of learning, think tanks, and other social structures to indoctrinate the populace on fall economics and government. To many, it began with the Powell Manifesto. I am confident that over time, the Patriotic Millionaires, along with hundreds of poorly funded economic and social justice organizations, will reverse that damage. Now, folks, I want you to listen to this interview with Maurice Pearl. It gives us hope that he may just start that avalanche of wealthy folk who realize they can't stand alone, who realize that inevitably, if they don't do something, something will be done to them. Because in their capitalization of all, in their acquisition of all, in effect, they're stealing from most. In effect, they're causing the destruction of the livelihood of most. So listen to Maurice Pearl. I think it's a pretty revealing interview, and it also gives one the sense that in effect we have people out there, we have rich people out there, we have wealthy people out there that are actually willing to be a part of the solution. So without further ado, I give you Maurice Pearl. First of all, Maurice Pearl, former managing director of BlackRock, Inc. Mr. Pearl is chairman of the board of the Patriotic Millionaires. Previously, Pearl was a managing director at BlackRock, one of the largest investment firms in the world. He worked on the maiden lane transactions and assessing the government's potential losses from the bailouts of Citibank and AIG. He also advised Her Majesty's Treasury of the bailout of Lloyds and RBS, as well as similar projects for the Central Bank of Ireland and the Bank of Greece. Prior to BlackRock, Pearl enjoyed a long tenure on Wall Street, where he invented some of the securitization of technology, connecting America's capital markets to consumers in need of credit. He is a CFA charter holder, a member of the CFA Institute and New York Society of Securities Analysts. Mr. Maurice Pearl, it is my pleasure to have you here this morning.
Thank you, Egberto. It's great to talk to you.
Well, I mean, your resume is impressive. So let's pretty much get with it. Tell me a little bit about yourself, where you were born in, were you born into wealth? How did you build your wealth and income?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I'm 55 years old. I was born in a little town in upstate New York. My family, when I was little, owned six little clothing stores in six little towns near the Canadian border. Two of them were so far away, I actually have no idea where they were. But four of them, my father brought me to visit occasionally as he was traveling around, working at them. And that's where we lived. His parents, his parents and grandparents emigrated from Eastern Europe. Kind of like in Fiddler on the Roof. That was the ancestors that I had, and I had the advantage of being able to take advantage of public education and schools in upstate New York. And then my family moved to Vermont at one point. We did that, and I went to the University of Pennsylvania. Started, hundreds of years ago by people with a lot of foresight, and was able to get an education in then this new field of computer science and computer engineering. I had the good fortune of being in the right place at the right time when asset securitization was first starting in the 1980s. I was able to take my computer science skills and abilities and apply them to this new thing on Wall Street, where they were taking thousands and thousands of mortgages and putting them together in pools and selling them off to investors that way. And that was something that simply could not have been done without computers. And so that's kind of how I made my career for many years. And then sort of started branching off into a few other activities. But I had the very good fortune of being born in the right place, the right time in the United States of America, to parents who told me I can do whatever I want, and I did. And now I've decided, after one day, literally being at a due diligence meeting in Athens, Greece, and thinking I was watching a parade for a few minutes while we were having a lunch break, it turned out I was actually watching a sort of a demonstration or a riot kind of moving down the street towards Parliament Hall. And I turned around, I looked at the 10 or 20 people standing there having lunch in a fancy dining room in a bank headquarters. And I realized I was doing a lot of work for these 10 or 20 people and helping them, but I wasn't sure I was really helping the rest of the people in Greece all that much. And I decided I had to find something to do that would help, not just my own personal children, but my children's generation. And so anyway, I decided to get involved in politics and policy full time about a year and a half ago.
Do you consider what you are doing a civic duty? And if so, why?
Well, I mean, not a duty. People aren't required to, do policy work. Of course, not everyone does, and the country wouldn't work too well if everybody was doing politics, of course. I mean, I consider it. I feel like I have to do something with people to help people. I want to feel like I'm accomplishing something. And accomplishing something means helping people. And I have the very good fortune and luck of having made enough money that I don't really need to make more money for my family right now. And so, yeah, this was what makes sense for me.
Now, when I read about the Patriotic Millionaires, when you guys just came out, as you know, I'm a national blogger. The first thing I said was, wow, this is a template that was needed right now to present to a whole lot of people, not from an altruistic point of view, but in effect from a necessary point of view. There's one thing, you said you were into computer science. Arithmetic matters, and the growth of money and how it affects everyone matters. And knowing exactly what happens to money in the aggregate, I think it's extremely important. So, most millionaires would think they are smart. Most millionaires, billionaires would think that they know how things should run. Why is it that most don't understand that absent any changes, the system just won't stand?
Yes, there are a lot who think they're very smart. What strikes me as funny is not only the people like Sergey Brin, who started Google,
Right.
think smart, who really is very smart, but guys who were smart enough to have rich grandparents who are
Right.
really smart. And that sometimes strikes me as funny. But it's like I don't claim to be altruistic, really. I mean, I like people to think I'm a nice guy, but I don't really claim to be an altruist. I remember I'm paraphrasing a talk that Senator Al Franken gave before he ran for Senate, and somebody asked him, why are you so altruistic, Al? And the answer was, and I'll take this to myself too, I'm not altruistic at all. I'm actually pretty greedy. But what I'm greedy for is different than what those other guys are greedy for. They're greedy for more money. I'm greedy for a country with more fairness and justice for my kids to grow up in. So I feel we need that, because if we end up with a country where we have to have rich people behind like big 12-foot walls and driven around armored cars, well, I don't want to live in that country. If I did, I could move to, I don't know, Uzbekistan or Mozambique right now. But I don't want to. I want to live in the United States. I want to live in the United States that I remember from when I was growing up watching Ozzie and Harriet and Leave It to Beaver, where everyone was doing well. And if somebody wanted to start a business, well, everyone in the town had enough money to shop at his store or whatever he had. That's the kind of place where I want to live, where everybody in the country makes enough money to be able to support businesses and do stuff and participate in commerce and participate in civic society. That's the country where I want my kids to grow up. So that's what I'm working on.
The Patriotic Millionaires, you representing them, of course. You're in Washington, D.C. right now, meeting with senators. Tell me, how did that go? Did you see some positive results from this meeting?
Well, I don't know if we changed the world. We had a great meeting with Patty Murray from Washington, with Tammy Baldwin from the state of Wisconsin, just for instance. But those are people who, frankly, were probably most on our side before we called them, to be perfectly honest with you. I think we might have changed a couple of minds. A lot of our meetings were actually with senior staffers of senators. Right. I think we might get a few people to sign on, for instance, to the closing this loophole that people that get carried interest pay lower taxes than actually people who work for a living. Mm-hmm. And that's something so egregious. Even Donald Trump talked about it, on our side. I mean, we found one guy who actually will speak publicly that it's a good idea, but that one is so egregious that the only argument against it is, well, we need sort of comprehensive tax reform and one big bill that does lots of things, not just a few little things. And it's true, it's not a huge thing, but it's symbolic that it's so egregious. So that's one of the things we've been talking about. And I think we might get some progress on that because, even Republicans actually think it's ridiculous. Right. So it's all on tactics that they've been talking, well, we want to save this, so when there's some big comprehensive tax reform, we can get some things we want, and you can get the other side can get some things they want, sort of thing. So there might be some progress. And I think, though, we're kind of moving the debate a little bit, even if we don't make progress on a narrow issue. I think we're making some progress in showing people that the idea that it's business people against the 99% is just false. Because business people and investors also want to live in a country with a robust middle class and with people who can afford to shop in their businesses. So it's really the very few multi-billionaires against everyone else.
Right.
It's the real debate. But somehow the other side has convinced people, no, it's not right to have less inequality. God meant for there to be lots of inequality, so you're going against God's will if you're against inequality or something like that. I mean, I don't really know what the argument is exactly, so I'm not trying to do a straw man argument here, but I think what we're trying to do is get our voice out there to show both the public and members of Congress and the House and the Senate that sort of everyone is in favor of progressive policies.
That is excellent. Now, I know that you have a new book out that is supposed to explain a whole lot of this stuff, and I noticed that it is conveniently placed on your left side.
We've got a picture of the cover right there. I've got the copy of the book right here. It's not too long. This is just the first of probably a series of books. This is only 30 pages or so.
Right.
But we're basically trying to explain our basic principles. And the basic point that we're getting across here is that we want everyone to be able to participate in what I would call civic society or political influence. We want all citizens to have access to power, not just the rich, who have much more access than the others. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to tell you that Congress people are like taking bribes or saying, oh, I have to support this because somebody paid me money and that's what they want. No, I think most of our Congress people, even the ones who are against me, are basically good, decent people. But what I think, though, is they never see the other side. They meet people when they go to fundraisers where people are paying thousands of dollars. There are people in this country, I've heard, who can't afford to pay thousands of dollars to go to fundraisers. And I think a lot of senators and members of Congress never meet those people because they're spending all of their time raising money because they need so much money to run their campaigns. So it's sort of an access thing. It's that, by getting access to your senators, you present your case, and nobody ever presents the other case. And so the problem seems obvious. The three basic principles that we're talking about in our book are that we want everyone to have sort of access to political access, political power, regardless of whether you're rich or you're poor. We want people that work full time to make enough money to be able to support themselves. So we want to have the minimum wage higher than it is now. And we want to make the tax system more fair so that those who are the richest among us pay taxes at a higher rate than average citizens, not at a lower rate, as seems to be the case sometimes now.
Well, now tell me, that book, I have a copy of that book. I got a pre-release copy,
Okay.
and I haven't completely read it, but what I've read so far, I loved it. So please tell our audience first of all, why they should and need to get that book, and where can they get that book?
Okay, the book is Renegotiating Power and Money in America. The ebook version is actually on Amazon right now, and I believe it's free. So we paid for producing the book and everything, and anyone who wants to can go to Amazon and look for Renegotiating Power and Money in America and download a copy and read it. It's a fairly quick read. It's only it's 63 pages. That includes some pictures. So that's the story. Yeah.
Well, Morris, give me a closing statement. Give me a closing message that every single middle class and poor American needs to hear from this rich man who is saying, I want to do my part.
Well, the thing is, you don't have to put up with people trying to tell you you're not supposed to do well. You can be in a situation where you're doing well too. And it's not wrong to want everyone to do well. It's not wrong to want less inequality. We're supposed to have a country where everyone is allowed to participate. Our Constitution started, we the people, and all the people are supposed to be participating, and that's the right thing to do.
Morris Pearl, founding member of the Patriotic Millionaires. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Egberto. Thank you very much.
And that was Morris Pearl. What do you think about this guy? Is he impressive or not? That is what, going forward, we're going to need out of our patriotic millionaires. That is what we're going to need out of people who really care about this country. That is what we're going to need out of people who realize that no, they are not self-sufficient. No, they are not in, on, and within themselves. No, they are not alone. And no, they didn't make or create that all on their own. We are a result of all those that came before us, all those that created, invented, and did things to allow those who created and invented before us.
we do not stand alone. And in this current state that our country is in, where we believe, not we, but where many believe, and especially those on the top, somehow believe that they have an inalienable right to the wealth that they've accumulated, they should remember one thing. This economic system isn't an economic system divined or an economic system that was ordained by some superior being. This is an economic system that was created by man. The man or the men or the folks who created the economic system, of course, created an economic system that was biased for those who did certain things. The others, of course, would then abide by said economic system and work within it. I always have one specific question that I ask every single person that I am in touch with speaking economics or anything of this nature. If there are people that are unemployed, and if there is a whole lot of work to be done, again, remember this, we have a lot of unemployed people, we have a whole lot of work that needs to be done. So therefore, there should be a match. What is it that stops those that are unemployed from being able to do work that must be done, work that need to be done? What's in between is a form of exchange. It's the economy. The man-made thing. That man-made thing is preventing work that is available and work that needs to be done from being able to connect. If your economic system cannot connect those dots, it is not an economic system worth having. If an economic system cannot ensure everybody can survive, everybody can work as they want to, then you have no economic system. Everything that you watch on CNBC and all these business channels, they give you all the pretty words, all these nice colors and derivatives and all these great economic words. They mean absolutely nothing for the average human being. And it's not that they mean absolutely nothing. These are instruments created to make money from doing nothing. Think about it. These are instruments created. What they do, the financial guys do many times, are instruments created to make money from doing nothing. Otherwise, we would be able to connect available labor with available work waiting. That's a fact. It is the economic system that prevents us from doing that. So as we go forward, as we move on, as we start thinking deeper, there's a good chance that the previous guest, Maurice Pearl, would sort of disagree with some of what I have to say because, of course, he was reared in a system where, almost, again, our type of economy is almost like the Bible. You just take it and you accept it the way it is because that's just the way it is. As an engineer, I think differently. You have a problem. You know what the solution is. You connect the dots. You create what needed to be created in between to close that gap. If there are people who want to be working and if there's work to be done, you must be able to connect them lest you have no economy. We need to start instantiating that within our minds so that when the politicians talk crap about wanting to cut this and cut that, we tell them exactly what the fact is. You cut nothing, because what is actually occurring is that's a deficiency within the economic system that we have been reared with. Adjust the economy for today's reality. Adjust the economy for today's reality. Folks, I wish you a very happy holiday, whatever it is that you celebrate at this time of the year. And I urge you to remain engaged. I urge you to continue listening to programs like what we give you here on KPFT. And by the way, we are attempting not to have a fun drive in December. We really want to keep good programming coming to you. So I want to make one ask today. When you're done listening to this show today, please go ahead and go to kpft.org
And please do give. Please do give a contribution to keep this station alive. And I would also ask that you do it in the name of Politics Done Right. We're coming to the end of the show. This is Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. I will be back with you next week, Thursday, at 3 p.m. Please keep listening. Please tell everybody out there about KPFT, that station that is going to be giving you reality-based information. And also ask them, become a member. We need members to keep the news going. We need members to keep this type of information going. So please be a part of it. Egberto Willies, Politics Done Right, and I'm out.
Thank you very much for listening to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. You can personally reach me by sending an email to egberto@politicsdoneright.com. Remember, Egberto is spelled E-G-B-E-R-T-O. Change starts with you. 90.1 KPFT gives you information not tainted by corporate interest. Please visit kpft.org and contribute. Let's ensure continued access to real information and news remain available to all. Again, thank you very much for listening to Politics Done Right.